Hey, Garrett, thanks for joining us today. As we're getting started, give us a little background on yourself.
So I'm an engineer by trade, actually in the B2B packaging space. So went to school for packaging engineering. Been in the industry about 17-ish years, in a variety of different industries, from uh, consumer products to private label items and a lot of different things. And most recently, kind of dived into spirits packaging, interestingly enough. So a lot of bottles and things that you see on shelves at bars when you're taking clients out to dinner, right? So,
Yeah.
so now I'm in the consumer packaging space and in distribution. So, um, basically linking my customers with not only factories but also networks of other factories and putting the whole deal together, and then ultimately coming out with a new product at that point in the spirit space. So,
What was the motivation to get into sales?
well, I'd say I was a recovering engineer, but you know, got an opportunity to kind of do more of a technical sales role because my background is more technical, which opened me to kind of understanding the sales process, and then ultimately now I've been in the sales role for now 4 years. So it was really just on a whim. Opportunity opened up, and I have learned a ton since that time about, you know, that background of 17 years, about it not really mattering. It's not about me, right? It's not about my job. It's not about what I know. It's not about my background. It's about, how you perform and how you treat your customers like they're the only person in the room, and that they feel heard and seen, and all the stuff that doesn't take a good technical person to know, right? So
And was that an epiphany, or is that something that you tried to fight off for a while, or
definitely tried to fight off. I think if I look back at what's funny is you can still have success doing that, right?
you
So I think
can? Yeah, sure.
in my thought, I had a lot of success. I'm like, look at me, I'm closing deals, I'm doing things. But then one day, like I said, an epiphany, a lot, obviously, thanks to a lot of your podcasts, a couple of other people that have mentored me, and things that I've went through, and understood that, you know, it's about listening, it's about empathy, it's about performing ultimately, right? Because there is a technical spot to my job, and I'm in a situation where once the sale's complete, there's a whole nother thing I got to do to manage the account and get it across the finish line. So there's a little bit of that I do still lean into, but ultimately, looking into the back of saying, oh, I was talking about, like, here's my experience, here's what I've done, like, I've done this, I worked here, I did that so many times on sales calls, and I just want to, like, go back and just be like, that you're talking about yourself. What are you doing here?
They
Like,
don't care, do they?
they don't care. No, and they shouldn't care.
Right.
They shouldn't care.
You're not interviewing for a job.
Exactly. So that was me for the first year, and I think I had that epiphany slash good coaching. And now I think of the smartest people, or the best salespeople we have in my organization, people that have been there 35 plus years. They're the listeners. They act like they're not the smartest person in the room, even though they do know a lot more than they put off knowing. You understand why they're so successful, and it's because they're listening, they're picking up on cues, the customer feels safe and heard, and it's just, that's all it takes, really.
Yeah.
Not all it takes, but it's performance still, but it's a lot of it.
And I think that's one of the things that people without a sales background who get into sales tend to think what sales is. If you know the product and the industry really well, that's all you need. And it's a start. It's good. You need it, but that's not really what the client wants from a salesperson. Well, what does your market want from a salesperson?
um, you know we while we're in distribution, right? So no matter what, market segment you're in, if you're in distribution, you're kind of a link between sometimes a customer and a factory that you also don't own, right? Or we do own a couple factories, so we do have some of those relationships, but at the end of the day, it's mostly, me working between two people, right? So at the end of the day, the only value that I'm adding is, well, obviously my service, right? But also, it's really the idea that I'm not on their payroll, and they're paying that premium to me to try to help their project move forward, not have to deal with that. No, things are going to show up on time, and I'm going to do all I can take to make sure they're getting the best price, the best service, and I'm looking out for things that they're not able to see, and they can focus on the bigger picture of their business, right? So I think that's more what I bring to the table, right? At the end of the day, because if I don't bring that to the table, there's no reason why they shouldn't just call the factory and have a transactional relationship. That's easy.
Yeah.
And I would tell them to do that if that's the case, because it doesn't behoove them to pay me to help them in that aspect. So it's really that link between the two, and kind of a piece of, basically working for them without being on the payroll, essentially, right? So
And who on the customer side do you interact with? What's the
um,
title of
yeah, so a lot of owners, a lot of C, depending on if it's an enterprise account, I do have a mixture, right? So I still handle some other enterprise accounts. So I'm dealing with like senior procurement people and SVPs of that level. So C-suite slash senior suite people in that level of the enterprise accounts. But it's also nice because I also handle people that own their own businesses, whether that's a food company or whether that's a distillery. And it makes it personal to me because that they're putting that money forward. They're trusting you with their livelihood, essentially, to make sure that if that gets in on, like, it can really wreck their business, their bottom line. So while it's sometimes keeps you up at night from time to time because you are nervous and you care about those customers, it's like this is real life situations that you can affect their whole situation. So I take personal that they're counting on me to perform, essentially. So yeah, I think that's the big thing.
now?
I'm dealing
I
with.
would have thought there'd be somebody in marketing. Is that not true? Or is that,
Sometimes depends on the
yeah.
size, right? Sometimes you have if you have a larger, like, enterprise, like, let's call it a bigger account, right? A distillery, let's call it, that's been very successful. You might have a marketing aspect of that you're doing design work with. It just depends, right? So it's a lot of different roles. Some days you got to go into that mode where you're like, okay, deal with the marketing person now for the next 3 months and tell them this is absolutely not possible. Like, this is possible, and putting them back to earth a lot of times. And other times it's just guy like, listen, I want good service. I just not been served at all the past however long this has been, and we just want somebody to look out for us. And those are easy. I mean, those are the easy ones where they look at you and they're like, we just want some care, you know.
You want the job
So
done right.
yeah, and so those are so, but it's good though. I like the mix. That's the fun thing. Having a conversation with someone that's like, I started this in my backyard. Here I am 10 years later. Versus next call you might be on is procurement person, transactional. Look, we need to sharpen your pencil. Like, here's your RFQ, and then you're just like, okay. So this is where this is going, right? The relationship matters, but it also, at the end of the day, they're looking for something also. So it's
Well,
dynamic.
that's, I got to imagine, because the marketing people want your design expertise and they want it to look the best it can be, but then procurement wants the margins hair thin, right?
Yeah, exactly. Which you run into each other all the time because there's two ways to that coin, which is funny. You can take the approach of path of, I'm going to go ahead and get marketing everything they want. So they're so loved and involved with it that procurement has to say yes, essentially, because at that point it's over. That's one path. Also, could be a terrible path because you get down that path and then they're saying absolutely not. And you're starting to piece, and the product turns into something that was not even what really anybody wants at the end of the day. So it's a balance. It's a balancing act for sure.
And who ends up turning into the final decision maker when you have
Uh,
those conflicts?
right. It's tough, right? So at that point, it usually goes into a situation where, you know, if it's a level where procurement and the marketing person sits very much on the scene, then you go into that senior leadership C-suite level that ultimately has to say, like, we're going with it or not. I don't care about the price. I need this to look good. Or yeah, I mean, it does happen for that time, which can slow processes down, right? Which are tough.
Well, that's it. Because in most business to business sales, procurement's kind of an administrative role, an execution role of they do what they're told.
Right.
But in consumer goods companies, they have a big seat at the table because they know all the ingredients that have to go in. And when you put them all together, they're too expensive.
Exactly. No, you're 100% correct, and especially in today's time, right, with inflation and just freight costs, and it's just wild to think of the things we've been through the last 2 years on that space, right, where shipping is insane, and then it's drops, and then it's just a wild it's a wild ride. Pricing and managing the accounts and making sure you're giving those savings back and making sure the customer feels like, oh, wait a second, hey, you didn't call me, and I've looked at the news and they've been talking about how freight's been going down A place and B place and C place. You know what I mean? You got to make sure you're
Right.
giving some of that back and being cognizant of, hey, here's where it's going now, here's your new pricing, and they're feeling good about it. So there's a lot of that for sure.
And how do you compete? Because I got to imagine, marketing, they're great people, but they're like cats with a laser toy, right? They look, oh, you're great. No, you're great. No, oh, I like
You're right.
this. I want it dark. No, I want it light. And you're kind of like chasing them because I got to imagine that before and after you, another vendor comes in.
You're right. No, you're right. The competition space is tough because they're not the type that you just bring to the golf course, right? It's not that type of relationship. It's like they want to see shiny objects, they want to see a new sample, it's one of those they call it surprise and delight where you put something together and mail it to them. They had no idea it was coming, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, look at this! This is amazing!" It's a lot of that. But to set yourself apart, I think it's the responsivity. It's transparency because a lot of people will go in there and tell them you can do anything. The world is your oyster, right? And I try to balance that out between like ultimately getting to them to what they want, but also telling them the reality and saving them time and telling them like, listen, we can go down this road, but then we ultimately won't get there because your plant can't run it. Or that is where my background helps me in a sense because I do trust that I'm trusted authority enough that I've been on the lines before. I know that, so it's a little easier for me to use that. So that helps me with the competition because anybody comes in and said, here's another shiny object, would you like ours or theirs? Well, then you don't have any differentiation. So I use that to my advantage in those moments. But you're right; it's still tough in some of those because at the end of the day, they're just like, you can give me exactly what they say they're going to, and then it might not end up that way in the end of the day, but you don't get the sale either way. So
And how did you learn the kind of the bigger sale issues? Because you had a great background in solving the problem and what works and what doesn't work. But how about as far as like getting the decision made throughout the client's organization?
I have obviously a lot of learning on the fly because I didn't really have formal sales training, so to speak. So yeah, you're right. I would spend a lot of time spinning my wheels. Right, I'm inherently a guy that wants to help everyone. So I would, I look at my board right here, and I have 10 accounts listed, and I have way more than 10 accounts, and I care about every single one of them. But I've also found time where I've spent time on number 100 because I want to help and be a good person, but I'm also not servicing the people that need me and I'm bringing not only bringing in revenue to me, but also I'm bringing in revenue to them. And you got to be able to balance that act. And I've got myself, like you said, stuck in the sales cycle before where I'm not getting those micro commitments or
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden I'm stuck and I'm wondering what the heck happened? Like where did I? It's because you balancing and spinning all the plates is the tough thing in sales. I would say I'm a very organized person, and I some days wake up and feel like, God, I don't know anything. Like I should because it's just it's a lot.
Well, that can be a big mistake because you only get paid on the deals that close.
Exactly.
So all the energy that goes to the deals that doesn't close is just academic.
And that happens a lot. I spent so much time doing that, and you go, wait a second, they're not closing, and yet they take the exact same amount of time that the enterprise deals do, right? I've had that happen so many times, and learned now a lot more way to say no to things, right? To not That's the other huge thing I've learned a lot in the sales role. It's like when I first started, I was lucky that I didn't have accounts transferred to me, right? I always laugh if you've ever been in sales and they say when you start, here's some accounts. They're never good accounts, right?
Of course. Yeah, here's my golden goose account. That
Yeah,
doesn't.
it never happened. So I was lucky enough that I didn't have a ton of those. So I was able to go out and organically prospect on my own and find my own accounts, which has served me well now in 2 years of being in my company now, where I've grew a book of business on my own, which is healthy. But I also spent all that time like, okay, am I going to be I got to get this deal. Like I want to get that first one, or I want to do this one. And I've found the more you sit back and act like not trying to say like you don't need the deal or like trying to act like blow the customer off, but it more or less like, hey, I don't even know if we can help you yet. Like, I don't know if I'm even the right fit. If you got a great supply chain and you got a good partner, I'm not here to screw that up. Like, maybe I can help you over here, or maybe you just call me when something happens and we keep this dialogue going. Like,
Right.
that shows the real empathy of like, I'm not here to be a salesperson. I'm here to
It
not,
builds
and it's not,
trust.
yeah, it
Yeah.
builds trust, the rapport, right? That's the important thing. So
Yeah.
I've
And
learned that.
what do you feel is your strongest sales characteristic?
It's hard, right? Because it's like you said, there you go, building relationships. It's not it. I would say it's the performance factor of when I say I'm going to do something, that I do it. And if I do mess up, or if I do have an issue or something happens and it's at my own behest and it's my fault for sure, or if it's even not my fault, I make sure that I own up to it and I'm transparent and say, no, this is totally on me. Like, I didn't do X, Y, or Z, which is why you're in this situation. Here's what I'm going to do to get us out of it. Or here's my, like, that I would say is, my strong suit of just being transparent and actually performing or owning up if it doesn't happen or something happens, right? So
And how do you judge which of those deals to work on? You talked about your whiteboard with the 10 on it, and then there's
you mean like
90 others.
I just use my CRM, and then all my sales leaders send me a
Oh,
million
that's
questions and
right.
tell me,
That's
yeah,
right.
that's what
That's what it's
happened.
there
That's
for.
yeah, yeah. No, I laugh because that's the tough dynamic also as well, right? Because you have the different leaders and sales leaders, the ones that are CRM crazy, the ones that are just like, you're doing your job effectively. I'm going to trust you, trust that you're doing the right thing. It's that balancing act that's really tough. And I would say it is, everybody has the love and hate relationship with CRM, but if you put in what you put out, like, I do like it because I use it as a tool for me also to check the revenues and check the dollar amounts and go, this actually is a real deal, and I should be focusing on this top tier accounts here and closing those, because not only for my company's sake but also for me personally and my family, right? I mean, in sales you
Yeah,
gotta.
but the information in the CRM is comes from you.
Right, you're right. Yeah, so
So
I put
if you're typing it in, you go, look, this looks like a great deal.
yeah, you're right, you're
So
you're
it's your
exactly right.
judgment judging your judgment.
You're true. That's true. No, but no, I mean, I would say I try to not do the fire of the day. I'd love to tell you that I set my day up effectively, and I try to not look at email but twice a day. That's what I want to do. It doesn't happen that way.
No,
But I do to the most part try to track based on the most value for what I'm going to gain and the customer's going to gain. But I have done a better job of looking at those deals that way and making sure, hey, I'm all the way, I'm almost 95% here. Why am I not closing this? Like, it's sitting there. My company sees it sitting there. Clearly, that's why the questions are being asked, and I'm not closing it. There's a reason. Like, I got to go back to here, refocus here. Like, what's going on? So there is a little bit of, I look at that way. It's not just dollars for me either, right? It's the most impact growth wise, right? It's like, this might be a young company, but I know there's huge potential. So it's like, let's get
yeah.
this deal done so I know I can be in there for the next 10 years. And hopefully when I retire, they're still a customer, right? I mean,
Well, I got to imagine in your space that you get a lot of false positives,
you
because
do.
it's like the website in some sense, right? The packaging for the product is like the website for some companies.
Yep,
And
you're right.
everyone's got an opinion about it. Everyone wants to refresh it every 2 years or so. And then they end up maybe not doing anything
You're right.
because somebody loves the old design.
You're right. No, there's certainly a lot of that, where you get down a toll pipe. You might do a complete design. You might have worked so much on the deal, and finally the other day they're like, well, we're keeping our existing one, or we'll keep this in the bag and let us know when we'll let you know when we're ready to, that does happen a lot. I don't know. You take it with what you want, because there's some things you could have probably done better, which is probably during that sales cycle process. Like, tell them why it's important, coach them on why this will help your brand, this will help refresh it, versus just giving them the deliverable and then letting it go nowhere. So letting it just sit and fall. So that's the type of sales stuff that has nothing to do with my background, right? It has to do with
It's
keeping those
judgment.
commitments going and
Yeah.
keeping the right, um, keeping it forefront on their mind, right? So
Have you found a way or signals early in the sales process to kind of say, well, this might just be a science experiment versus a selling event?
absolutely. No, yeah, you finally kind of talk a little bit more about what they do now, when they, how many, obviously a little bit about volumes matters, like how much they're buying, a little bit of that, because you're looking at it, how they're funded, what they're in the spirits packaging space is different because they have distribution. So they might be in 6 states, they might be in 12 states, they might be in 50 states, they might, then you can kind of gauge, like, all right, there's a model around here where these things are getting shipped in different areas. This is actually a good deal. But it is tough, the ones that are the startups. It's like, I got this new celebrity, I'm ready to they're all in on this project and we're going to do this great design. And you're like, any normal person would be excited, like, oh wow, so and so is on this model, and we're going to, and all of a sudden it's like, well, they wanted this and they're not involved anymore, so maybe we're going to. I'm like, then you've wasted all your time, right? So you've got to ask a lot of it's the clarifying questions, right? I mean, I think
Yeah.
that was huge. I've spent many times in the front of my career getting excited and going through the process, and then, oh crap, what happened? You have to qualify, and if you don't qualify right, you're wasting your time once again. So
Yeah, because I got to imagine that you could do a beautiful design, it's economical, it makes business sense, and yet they don't do anything.
you're right. Yeah, it happens more often than you would like. But like you said, you gotta make sure that they're really committed ahead of time to the process and to the actual, and I think it's also finding the issues, because a lot of times when I'm going in there, it's not a whole lot of like everything's great and we're just ready to change a new design. It is existing supplier issues or whatever, and I'm coming in with a solution. So you got to find their pinpoint problem, and if you're not providing a solution to something, you're really, like you said, you're just spinning your wheels because they don't have
Yeah.
any other. And then somebody else, like you said, can come in there and give them another shiny object, and they'll go with that. So you got to have a solution for them for a problem that probably exists, because there's majority of the time there's always a problem. If there's not, you probably don't want to be selling them because
Yeah.
it's not going to be good.
So that's on the definitely a positive side. On the negative side, where it is just an experiment, what are the signals there? Oh, we just want to refresh. We just want some new ideas, or
Yeah, it's like, yeah, let's look at 5 designs, see what we can do, and yeah, let's go through the process. And then it's like you narrow it down. You've been like, I literally had one customer or prospect, it wasn't a customer, go through 10 different design iterations, ultimately probably using our design, taking it to a competitor and going with them, right? So utilizing my entire company resources, time, effort, their salaries, everything, to then in turn basically hand it off to the other team to go score the touchdown. Um, that's the stuff you got to look out for. Are they really committed? How? Yeah, it's a little bit of like obviously gut feeling, but it's also, like I said, you got to know, have a framework of clarifying questions to know that, all right, these people are legit or they're just trying to spin our wheels. Like at round 5, I probably should have stopped and said, time out here, hold on. Are you committed to this? Is it just going back and forth on design, and not waste more time instead of 5 more rounds, which was my mistake, right? So
yeah, because it sounds a lot like advertising, like an advertising agency. They all work that way. Everyone comes in and pitches the ideas that they did for free. And sometimes they just take the ideas and do them themselves or do it with their cousins, website company or
you're
whatever.
right. Yeah.
And I guess, is there probably no way to prevent that, or you have to use your own skills to say, like, this is a goat rodeo and it's just not going to pan
Yeah,
out?
and I think there's obviously financial things on that as well. Like, I've what I will tell you, one thing on sales that has got me in trouble, not once again not having really formal training, is overselling your credit department. Or I was like, wait, I got to worry about finance. Like, wait a second. Like, if they pay their bills, I'm in trouble. If they don't, I'm in trouble. Like, wait, hold on here. So honestly, letting them look at their financials, making sure they actually do have the cash to go through the sales cycle process. Because I've gotten to the final end, and it's like, hey, we need X amount of hundreds of $1,000s up front to get this across the finish line. They're like, oh, they just laugh at you. Oh, what? We need it up front? Yeah, you don't have any credit, right? Oh, so I've learned on the sales cycle as well. Once again, not knowing, you can't oversell your credit department either. It's a so there's a lot of that upfront work.
And what sales skill do you think, if you developed more of or initiate it, would really take your game to the next level?
I would say listening. Um, every time you're talking, the customer's not, right. I'm way better than I used to be, but I still feel that it's like that urge. Like, I laugh because I think someone said at one time, I want to put a rubber band on my wrist, and every time I'm in a meeting, I just snap it when I have the urge
Snap it
to
when you're
talk. Right? It's like, it's so true though. That's really a skill that's so easy. It's so simple in your head,
well,
but we just love to hear ourselves talk.
well, especially coming from an engineering background where you know the answer, you want to share some knowledge, and maybe they don't want to hear it or it doesn't really move the conversation forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think about it all the time. Let's say I walk out to a manufacturing line and I say, "Oh my gosh, like why would you use that? I got a better solution there. We've done this in the past." Maybe he spent all his time a year
Love it.
long saving money, uh, putting it together, thought he got the best solution from what and I'm over there poo pooing on his on what he did for a year, and that's going to make him feel great that I came in there with my expertise. So yeah, no, you're
Yeah.
right. I I've had a whole new approach to that once I finally, like I said, which I'm glad I learned it early on. I would have hated to do this for 10 years, talking about myself constantly, and then turn around and be like, man, I could have closed a lot more deals and helped a lot more customers if I actually took time to not be the smartest person in the room.
And what techniques have you used to become better at that? Like the wristband thing, or just little reminders that this might not add anything to the conversation?
I laugh. It's like if I'm on a Zoom call and I'm not in person, it's easy. I just keep I have a microphone that can be on mute without anybody knowing you're on mute, and it's like I get ready to talk, and it's like it's funny. It's like a factor of stopping yourself, right? In person, it's harder, right? You want to build relationships and rapport, and you're talking about, you know, I laugh because it's like every salesperson goes in there. It's like, how about the game, man? Did you like that call at the Eagles game? Like, like what? There's a lot of that, like, and it's like some people read right into that and go, he doesn't give a crap about how my weekend was. He's just being a sales guy, right? So
Yeah.
how do you balance that act and try to? So yeah, I don't know. I will say that I don't have any perfect situations other than like I try to do attentive listening. I'm not already thinking of what I'm going to say before the customer is even done talking, because you're not listening if that's the case. So I'm trying to listen and not let my mind sit there and think about the next thing to say. So
So you bring up a good point, because a lot of people are good with that first 5 minutes of rapport about the weather, the game, the weekend, whatever it is, traffic. What have you used to kind of build up that first 5 minutes to break the ice and get them talking?
I try to, if it's somebody I've never met before, I, tend to, it's not really weather. It'll ask about their kids or dog or have something funny. Like, I mean, there's times even where I have a 4 year old and I laugh because like you can tell the room of the customer where he might just like bounce in my door and I'm on a call, and some people be aghast, but it's also it adds a little personal touch to it a
Sure
little bit,
does.
and so there's a little bit of, I feel like, being real and not breaking down that barrier of the salesperson, because everybody, like, I think someone said it best, everybody's being sold in in this new age all the time. I mean, constantly advertising. So it's like the sales resistance radar is so high now by
It
everybody,
is.
including myself. I mean, I think
Yeah.
about what I do every day. Like the example, if you walk into uh, a place that's probably, I'm trying to think, not a car dealership, but let's call like Best Buy, and like the guy comes up to you, hey, can I help you? No, I'm good. Like you were there for something, but you're already immediately turned off by
Right.
the
The
person
automatic
asking you for help.
response.
And I'm a salesperson. I'm just shooting this guy off an objection immediately. So there's a lot of that I try to make it a little bit more personal, and not get into the business because there's a reason why we're talking, and be cognizant of their time. That's one of the first things. Like first thing, hey, listen, do you have 15 minutes? Do you have 30 minutes? Like, what's the time? When do you need to leave by? Do you have another meeting? Like, want to make sure we're cognizant of that, and then kind of don't go straight into the pitch. That's the other thing. Ditch the pitch. Like you got to find a way to be able to build that trust and not just put a slideshow up and say, all right, we're going to go through it. It's more than that.
Yeah. Cool. Hey, I really appreciate your time today. Where can people
Yeah.
go to connect and follow you?
I'm on LinkedIn. My last name is Mager. It's Garrett. So Garrett Major. And yeah, I would love to add more people on there, and really appreciate the podcast, Brian, and keep up the great work because I've learned a ton already from since I followed it for a couple of years. So thank you so much.